Welcome to episode 47 of In Touch with iOS, a podcast that talks about iPhone, iPad, Apple Watch, Apple TV, and related technologies, plus tips, apps, and gear. I am your host, Dave Ginsburg, and this week my guest is Josh Centers from TidBITS. How are you doing, Josh?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me on, David.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. You're a first-time guest. Really appreciate you being here, and we're gonna talk a little bit about. There's a new story in our agenda for today, and of course, you are a great author of many Take Control books at takecontrolbooks.com, and the two I wanted to talk about today would be Take Control of Notes, which I'm so thrilled you did, because that's a great book, and there really never any focus on that topic. And then Take Control of iOS 12, and we've got some great tips that we're going to talk about in a little bit here, as well as I always inaugurate my first-time guests by asking them what their iOS devices are, and we have to find out what you have in your toolbox as far as anything related to iOS. So let's go right in, and we'll get started. Or we could talk about the news. There was one news article that just actually came out while we're recording this. I don't know if you had a chance to pick at that as of yet, but it's Apple had pulled the iPhone 7 and iPhone 8 models for sale in Germany amid some big battles which they've been having with Qualcomm. If anybody isn't aware, there's a big battle between Qualcomm and them having problems with patent infringement and infringing on other things. Have you reviewed any of this as far as what Qualcomm is doing to Apple?
All I really know about is the situation with China that happened a while back, and of course, Apple had to issue that emergency iOS 12 update to work around that patent business, and so they could start selling their phones in China again. And so it's kind of interesting that there's another issue in Germany now. Did not address this before. I haven't heard about this one specifically, so I'm a little confused.
No, it just got posted as we record this, and basically, there's the big legal battle spanning across multiple countries, actually, because Apple was sued Qualcomm sued Apple, alleging royalties, and then Apple's actual position is saying that it's a desperate attempt to distract the real issues between the companies, and then their tactics, what Qualcomm's doing seems extreme with the exorbitant fees that they're trying to charge. So, if any listeners in Germany, and if you go, I actually went to the German Apple website, and you don't see any more iPhones other than the XS, the XR, and the XS Max. So you are out of luck if you want to buy an iPhone 7 or iPhone 8 out there in Germany. So,
it's all part of Apple's genius plan to sell you the new iPhones.
I saw that. I was like, wow, you're really forcing people to spend over $1,000 on a phone. Well, not the XR, but it was kind of an interesting thing to see. So, but with that, let's move on to our topics. And as I said at the beginning, I always like to find out what my new guests have as far as their iOS gear. What kind of iPhone do you have?
I'm afraid I'm part of the reason for Apple's decline. I did not get a new one this year. I have an iPhone 10. And mostly because I didn't really see the new ones as being that interesting.
Sure.
And I'm on the iPhone upgrade program, but I'm just kind of hoping to pay this one off. Anyway, also, it's good to have a test device. So if I have one that's paid off and I get a new one, that's always a good thing. I have an iPhone 6 somewhere. I don't really use it. The battery's shot. I didn't get it replaced because the Apple Store is a long way away. And but I just use that for testing during the summer months. And then I have an iPad Pro 10.5 inch from last year.
Okay.
And I have the Apple Pencil and the keyboard and all that good stuff for it. And also somewhere around here I have an iPad Air. And I keep these old devices around. Well, so when I start working on the book, I try to start as soon as possible. I'll try to start with beta 1. And then I'll, so I have these old devices around, and I'll put it on the old devices first, and I see how that goes. And if things go well enough, whatever point that is, it could be beta 1, it could be beta 3, it could be beta 6. I'll put it on my main devices because I find I can't really write authoritatively about this stuff until I live with it every day, warts and all. So And that's sort of my process. So I like to keep, an older generation of stuff around, and then I have my current stuff, and
Yeah.
then, over time, I get new stuff, and the cycle continues.
Yeah, I think we're very similar in that case. I'm on the trade-in plan as well, and I do trade in every year. So I was tempted to keep the 10, but I didn't do it. I did initially, but then I ended up turning it in as a trade-in to and then gave in. So,
Yeah.
but of course you're a big Apple TV guy too, because you also wrote the book on Apple TV for Take Control. I'm assuming you have a few of those.
Yeah, I have two Apple TVs. I have the Apple TV 4, of course, which is actually a developer kit. Apple
Mm-hmm.
was nice enough to send me one of those when you get one for $1. And
Nice.
yeah, so I got one of those, and it helped me get the book out a little earlier than I thought I would. And then I got an Apple TV 4K, and I didn't just rush out to get it because I wasn't that impressed with it, to be honest. But then DirecTV Now had a deal. Where you
Me
pay
too.
you pay for 3 months, you get the free Apple TV. I'm
That's
like,
what I
well,
did.
heck,
Yeah.
that's an amazing deal. I can't pass that up. So I did that.
I did too. Great minds think alike, huh?
Right, right. Well, I mean, just to rant a little bit here, the Apple TV 4K is just too expensive for what it is. It's nearly $200. I mean, you can get a lot of really neat stuff for that price. And frankly, I hate to say this, being the guy who wrote the book on it, but I haven't even touched my Apple TV in months. We got one of those TCL Roku TVs, and we just use the Roku software. And my other TV, I have my PlayStation hooked up to that, so I just use the PlayStation on that. And I don't have a lot of reason to use the Apple TV, so I've just kind of moved away from it, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. Well, and then of course, and you're not an Apple Watch guy, right?
Nah, I have the Series Zero, I guess they call it now.
Right.
I just didn't see much. Well, I got it. I got it, to help with TidBITS coverage. Because we assumed there would be all these great apps that would be worth writing about. And of course, that hasn't really been the case. And so I haven't found much call to get one. Although recently, Adam Inkst was off work for a week, and I found myself having to edit Apple Watch stuff.
Yeah.
I'd be like, hey, Adam, can I bug you for a minute? Can you look at this? Because I don't have a clue. So I might have to get a Series 4 at some point just so I know what the heck people are talking about. But, it's gotten very expensive to keep up with the entire Apple ecosystem now.
It is, yeah. If you're on a limited budget, it's going to be tough.
And unfortunately,
go ahead.
Yeah, if you're in the writing field, yeah, your budget is certainly not unlimited.
That's for sure. So, but all right. Well, I'm great to hear what all the great things you do have, and you definitely have to stay on top of these things, especially since you're writing all these awesome books. And that's what I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about a little bit with you on Take Control of Notes. I was super stoked when you released this book, Josh, because no one's ever talked about this topic before, and it's such a great tool, and a lot of people don't even know what its maximum capabilities it has. So, and it's and guys, it's a really reasonably priced book. I mean, for $4.99, it's worth. Is it $4.99, right?
$5.99, I think.
$5.99. Sorry about that. I didn't take that $1 from you. For $5.99, that's it's a bargain. I mean, for what he's reviewing. So, but we're going to talk about a few of the things in there that you really highlighted. First off, was one of the topics that caught my eye was making and managing notes, and you go through a lot of the details and relates to where you put your notes. And why don't you kind of touch upon that a little bit as far as what you found was in that topic.
Right. So, a lot of people may not realize about notes is that there's actually a lot of ways you can make a note. And it seems so obvious even if you use notes for a long time. You think, okay, open up the notes app, hit the little pencil button there, and you make a note. But there's actually a lot of ways you can do it. If you have a keyboard attached, and whether this is an iOS show, so I'll try to stick to iOS here. But if you have a keyboard attached, it's Command-N. It's the same thing on the Mac. But you can also, if you have an Apple Pencil and you have a compatible iPad, one of the newer basic iPads and iPad Pro, you can just tap the pencil on the screen, and that will create a new note for you. And it lets you quickly jot down notes in like a meeting or take a sketch or whatever. And if you don't have an Apple Pencil, if you just or you can't find your Apple Pencil because it rolled off your desk, there's a notes button in Control Center you can tap and create a new note. And there's all sorts of settings that go along with that.
Mhm.
Different ways you can create a note. Like for instance, you can resume a note you already started. You can create a whole new note. Siri can create notes. And perhaps one of my I hardly ever use that, but one of my favorite ways to create a note is you can share something. So from the share sheet, you can select notes as your
Right.
target, and
Yep.
then you can create a new note with that, and you can embed. There's all kinds of stuff you can embed in a note. A lot of people don't realize this, but I heard from some readers after they had read the book, and they
Mhm.
started playing with all the stuff, and they're like, "Hey, I can add this to a note." I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. You can share from like voice memos. You can embed a voice memo in a note. You can embed
Mhm.
a photo or a video in a note. You can embed
Yeah, that's
web
crazy.
pages. Yeah, web pages. Map. So that's one of my favorite obscure uses is if you're compiling like I don't know map data for some reason, you can share a map location to a note.
No, yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy. Even organizing notes. Do you find it to be easier to organize a lot of your notes that are in the app?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, I mean, it's as far as it's easy enough to create the notes, but as far as organizing them, because I always find challenges trying to find where my notes are. Do you have you delved in that at all as far as that goes?
Yeah, I mean, it's not as it's not as feature rich as Evernote.
Right.
Uh, you don't have tagging, you don't have things like that, but you also don't have all the bulk, you don't have all the weight.
Right.
Um, so for me it balances out. If you're a person who you have needs beyond just kind of what the old Notes app provided. The old Notes app is just very bare bones, but
Mm.
you don't want all the heft of something like Evernote. That it works pretty well. Like you can create folders and organize your notes that way. You can so it's pretty basic in that regard. The search actually works pretty well in my
Mm.
experience, especially for an Apple product. And I offer some tips in the book for dealing with that. Like for instance, just because it doesn't support tags doesn't mean you can't add something like a tag to your
Right.
note. You can add some keywords to the bottom of a note to make it easier to find. That's especially useful if you do things like one thing Notes can do, it can scan documents, and so you can
Oh,
scan a
I love
document.
that feature.
Yeah, it's an amazing feature. A lot of people don't know about it. You can scan a document, and then you can add, if you add some keywords to the bottom of it, down where you're not going to see it anyway, then it makes it easier to find. So, between the folders and the search, I found that finding notes in notes is, usually pretty easy.
Yeah. Um, Password protecting notes. Have you found that to be easy? Because sometimes I had trouble if I don't remember the password. You're kind of out of luck, right?
Yeah, you're up the creek if you get your password because you can
Yeah.
reset the password, but then those notes are locked forever unless you somehow remember the password. So
Yes.
I even had I don't feel bad. I had a little bit of trouble with that when I was drafting the book because I had some notes I'd locked
Oh
just as a
yeah.
test, and then I'd forgotten the password. and
Yeah.
um, so that's something that's very important. If you use something like one password, be sure to note that stuff down. Be
Yeah.
sure to note that stuff down.
Yeah, because I got in trouble when I couldn't find the password, and then at least I got lucky and found it in one password. But yeah, you got to be careful with anytime you put a password on any file. I mean, it's the same thing if you use a Pages document or a Word document. If you put a password on it, you got to be careful.
Yeah. I mean, it's common sense, but it trips people up. But it's a useful feature if I mean, I wouldn't store passwords in a note, but
Hmm.
things like, hey, for instance, like, it's just past the Christmas season, but let's say you're working on a Christmas list and you don't want
Right.
somebody to look through your phone and see where you're getting people
Right.
for Christmas. You can password protect that, lesser stuff like that, or here's something. Sometimes I'll like just add in a note. Like for instance, a friend of ours, they wanted us to check on their house, and they told us the
Hmm.
passcode to get past their security system. And so I just opened that in a note and jotted it down because that's my reflex, and it's a lot easier than opening one password and finding wherever the heck you put notes at and all that. And so I wrote that down, and then you can password protect something like that and keep it secure.
Yeah.
So it's good for things like that. It's a really nice thing to know about.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then other thing I know you talked about in the book was importing notes from other services. Did you? I'm a OneNote user because I
Hmm.
have to be on the Windows world, unfortunately, for work. So,
Right.
did you try to do any importing with OneNote? Did it go well or?
Not OneNote. I wrote an article a while back for TidBITS where
Mhm.
I imported all my notes from Evernote, and that worked pretty well. And all things considered, I mean, you lose
Yeah,
some of the fancier formatting options.
sure.
But the nice thing is that when it imports those things, it imports them into their own folder,
Hmm.
so they don't get mixed in with all the rest of your notes. Unless you want to mix them in. And I found it's actually it's pretty versatile when it comes
Okay.
to those imports too. I had a reader email. I can't remember the name of the app. It was some obscure app that hadn't been updated since like 2005 or so.
Kind
And
of one of
I
those.
yeah, and it's I download. I'm like, okay, I don't know about this, but I'll see. So I downloaded it, and I figured out how to export. Thankfully, it was just a simple. It does a simple RTF export, which Notes can
Yeah,
import, and
which is
yeah,
great.
and I made some test notes and export them, import them. Worked fine. I told them how to do it, and had a happy customer. So it does a pretty good job. Now, if I don't know about OneNote can do some pretty fancy stuff. Like OneNote,
It does.
you can draw on the screen, things like that. Is that right?
Yeah, you can draw on it. It's a lot of pretty comprehensive formatting, but Microsoft is going to be changing it pretty soon here, from what I'm hearing, because they have a standalone app. It's actually on the Mac too. I'm talking about it's not just Windows, and I'm not sure where their direction is going with that with the standalone app. I think it's going to maybe go away and maybe become just an online version, which they have. So they're still working through all that stuff. But no, I mean it is very powerful. So I was to say you're right. I mean the Notes app is basic. It's not anything extravagant, but it works great in that sense. But it will transfer. I would go under the assumption it'll transfer most things and look just what you need. So.
Mhm.
Speaking of looking, formatting notes seems like it's pretty powerful too, and a tool as well. So, and you went through the book and talking about a lot of the basic formatting. Did you find that some of the formatting tools were pretty good in Notes?
Yeah, I think Apple has reached a really good balance with the formatting tools and Notes, where they give you just what you need and nothing more and nothing less. You have if you want to go in and well, I want this to be one font and this to be another font, and I want to apply these different styles. It's not the thing for you, but
Yeah.
they really boil down the styles you need. So you have styles like title, heading, body, monospace, and then you have formats like bold, italics, underline, strike through,
Right.
and
Right.
it really gets to what you need. I mean, you can adjust the text size, stuff like that in settings, but they managed to boil down to just what you need in that little palette that pops up on your iPhone. So you're not overwhelmed with features and choices, but but you generally have what you need, if not necessarily maybe what you want.
Okay. Okay. And then I know a lot of the to-do lists are awesome. I mean, I think it works really
Hmm.
well, don't you think? I mean, I find it to be very convenient when you want a quick to-do list. Did you find anything different out of it with the to-do lists beyond what the basics?
Right. No, one of my favorite uses for notes are to-do lists. And one of the reasons is it's so freeform. You use something like OmniFocus. I love OmniFocus, but OmniFocus is like, for a lot of times for me, it's way too much machinery. You know,
Overkill.
yeah, it's a total overkill for what you need. What I like about Notes is that it's a lot more freeform. You're not forced to use a certain format, but you can do, like, for instance, if you want to do getting things done, Notes totally supports that because you can
Hmm.
create a to-do list, you can indent things, so you can have the top level be the project. People know getting things done. You have to-do items, and that's one thing that just it's just one single action, and then anything that takes more than that's considered a project, and then you
Right.
branch that out.
Yep.
You can do that using indents and outdents in Notes, which is a really cool feature. And then you can also share a note with someone else as a collaborator. I mean, not just send them the bare bones note, but actually add them as a collaborator if they have an iOS, or they can even do it from the web browser. But if they have an iOS device or a Mac, or an iCloud account. You can share that with them. My wife and I use that all the time for grocery lists. We use an app called Paprika, which is a really good recipe manager and grocery lists and stuff. But sometimes we clutter up our Paprika with a bunch of stuff, and when we don't have time to sit there and clean it out and figure out exactly what we need, I'll just make a shopping list in Notes. We'll share it real quick, figure out what exactly we need, and off we go. And even something like Paprika, it tries to do things like, oh, well, this is in this aisle, and this is in that aisle, and which is handy in certain but like when I need things like, okay, I need some meat and some light bulbs and a hammer, then Paprika starts getting confused by things like that. So Notes doesn't have that problem because Notes is just whatever you want to make of it. And so here's another use of Notes. Let's say you're going shopping. You got 5 places to go to do things or pick up stuff. Okay, you can create 5 headings. Let's say bank, Walmart, Tractor Supply. I live in the South, so post office, whatever. You can create headings for each place you want to go. Have a small to-do list under that. You can share that with your spouse or whoever, and you can both work on it, collaborating on that together, checking things off or adding things. Yeah, and it's so free form, and it adapts to wherever you want to use it for. And I try to show that in the book. I start off showing a very basic to-do list, and over time, over a few pages, I grow it and make it more complicated and add headings and things like that. And just to show you can take the one list and make it as simple or as complex as you want it. And it adapts to you.
And what I love is because it's on iOS, it works great, and especially on an iPad. The iPad gives you a fuller screen, but even on the iPhone, I've had some good experiences being able to just to create a quick note for something if I thought something and just pop it right in there. And you're right, or it could be extremely complex. Speaking of complex, you also can create tables, which is pretty phenomenal for a free app in Notes. How did you find that the tables worked when you did the book?
I'm going to be honest with you. I'm still kind of baffled by tables.
Okay.
I've asked a bunch of people. I'm like, what do you use these for? And no one really has a great use for them. I show some examples in my book. I've seen some examples. Like you can, I was selling some games, and so I was showing, you can use this. And
it's like a table.
Yeah, you can do like a table. And you can do like if your kid plays baseball, you can set up your baseball schedule. Honestly, though, like tables, like I don't see the point because anything I would use that for, I'd rather use like Excel or Numbers or Google Sheets or a spreadsheet that can do the math for me. But it's a nice thing to know. Like I'm sure there's somebody who's read this book or somebody who's listening right now who has a perfect use for a table and a note, and I'm there for you. If you want to know how to do that, I tell you how to do it. I don't quite understand why it's there. I asked Joe Kissel, our publisher, and Joe's, genius and stuff. He didn't have any clue either. And so, I'll tell you,
he doesn't know. Yeah, we're in trouble.
Yeah, I'm sure there's somebody at Apple who they had a very specific use case in mind. I would love to talk to that person, but unless Apple makes that happen, I'll never know.
And then the graphics, you talked about it a little bit earlier. I love the fact you can insert photos and videos. I mean, it's just phenomenal in a simple app like Notes. You also talked about continuity camera. I saw you did a video actually on how to use that. What is a continuity camera? What would so the listeners know what that will do for them?
Right. So continuity camera is a really clever feature of iOS 12 and macOS Mojave that lets you use your iPhone as a camera or a scanner for your Mac. So you set it up so you take a picture with your iPhone and it shows up in your Mac. That feature, it's cool, it's neat, but I don't really get the point because it's easy enough to take a photo and sync it anyway. What's really cool about continuity camera is you can use it to directly scan things to your Mac desktop. So yeah, I made that video about it. That's actually been a pretty popular video. So you can do this from a lot of different apps. You can do it from Notes, which is why we're talking about it. You can do it from your desktop, but you open a menu and you'll say import from iPhone, and then the camera or the scanner will pop up on your iPhone, and you take the picture, you scan the document, whatever, and it shows up on your Mac. Pretty magical feature, pretty cool. And so that's one of the things I explain in the book how to do. I also show you can just scan documents with notes for iOS. You don't have to have a Mac for that. You can just scan directly into a note, which is a really cool, handy feature. And there might be better. There's definitely better scanners, and there's better scanner apps out there. But hey, Notes is always with you. It's always there.
Right,
you don't have to find it on your home screen. You have to search for it. Really cool feature. And once you scan a note, you can also mark it up. You can edit and it makes a PDF. Like when you scan, it makes like a straight up PDF, and you can add pages to it and stuff. Yeah. So even if you just capture it quickly in Notes, and Notes doesn't have the tools you need to whatever it is you want to do with it, you can export that on your Mac and take it elsewhere and do what you need. But it's a great thing to know about, because you never know when you're gonna have to quickly scan a document. You never know when that's going to happen. So it's definitely a good thing to know about.
Yeah, and then the other tools I really like is the drawing and sketching along with the scanning. I mean, the scanning is great. I mean, just insert an image, boom, you got a note, and you can go back look at it later. Even with the with the sketching tools and taking notes and being able to use it with the Apple Pencil. I don't know if it's as good of experience using it on the iPhone, but have you tried much of that with trying to draw anything on the iPhone?
Yeah, I'm not a good drawer in the first place, so but
yeah.
It worked. I mean, it works pretty well. It'd work better if the phone supported the pencil. But for doing basic stuff with your finger, do basic sketches and things like that. It works pretty well for stuff like that. I have a friend who he's a lot more artistic than I am. He loves drawing stuff, and he really wears it out with his iPad and the Apple Pencil. There's all kinds of stuff. Now he'll use more specialized apps, but Notes has a lot of really interesting tools. Like, I think my favorite sketching tool in Notes is there's this on-screen ruler, and you plop it down on the canvas, and then you can use your fingers. You can rotate it, you can move it, you can make it bigger, whatever. But if you want to draw, and it'll tell you what angle you're at, like whenever you're rotating it. And then, so if you want to draw a straight line at any certain angle, you can just rotate it into place, draw your line, and then move it. And even though I'm not a very good artist, I love playing with that ruler because you can make a whole series of like very neat parallel lines with the ruler tool. So it's very satisfying.
Yeah, no, it is. It's fun, and I like the fact that if you have your iPad, you want to sketch something out, it's synced with your notes, and you can go right to your iPhone and take a look at it. So you always have that with you between both your devices. So, but that in a nutshell is Notes. I mean, there's like I said, it's a short and sweet book, but a good book, and it's not a bad read. So why don't you check that out, and we'll give you all the information at the end of the show too. So let's change gears here a little bit and talk a little bit about iOS 12. And you've been writing an iOS book since how far back, like iOS 8?
Yeah, you nailed it. See, it's great having a loyal reader as an interviewer in one of these things, because you buy all my books, you read them all. So it's great. I appreciate it.
No problem.
So we started, and that was back when we were doing the Crash Course books. It's actually one of our first Crash. Yeah, it was one of our first Crash Course books, and people don't know what I'm talking about. We experimented with this format. Take Control books are just in one column. We tried to do a 2-column magazine-like format we called Crash Course. And so there was iOS 8, a Take Control Crash Course, and that's how this series started. And then when Joe Kissel took over a couple of years ago, we decided to get rid of the Crash Course format, which honestly was great with me because we always had problems with it. It was super buggy. Our word processor didn't really like it much at all. So we just converted that to regular Take Control titles now. But anyway, I've been doing this since iOS 8, and that was the beginning. And that was a rough one too, because iOS 8.
Yeah, I remember that.
A lot. Yeah, well, I mean, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't finished on, like, because that was when they introduced a lot of iCloud based stuff, and there was a lot of stuff that straight up didn't work until launch day. And so I was flying blind for a lot of the summer, and then working with this new format, and so super stressful. But over the years since, we've had a lot of time to really polish this manuscript and make it shine. And Apple's gotten a lot better about their beta iOS releases too. So it's been fun watching that that evolution there.
So I pulled a few things that I thought that listeners would be interested in talking about a little bit. The first one was shortcuts. Shortcuts seems to be quite an advanced thing, because if everybody doesn't know, the Shortcuts app used to be a company called Workflow, and Workflow was a app that was awesome. Did a lot of automation. I mean, there's people out there that are doing all kinds of crazy stuff with it, but cool crazy stuff. But you did write a short piece as far as how to install it, and of course, installing the app is as easy as just going out and downloading it from the app store. It's there and installing it. Did you dabble into any of this at all, as far as using the shortcuts? Or, what did you find that stood out as far as shortcuts goes?
One of the things I've heard from people, and I have found true myself, is that a lot of people aren't really using the more elaborate shortcuts. What people are doing with shortcuts is using it to smooth over the rough edges in iOS and the things that Apple has made difficult to do. A classic example, downloading an MP3 from a web page.
Right.
On a desktop, that's a really easy thing to do. On iOS, it's been almost impossible. Yeah, I mean, you have to have a special browser or some kind of hack. So what you can do now, there's actually in the shortcuts gallery. Yeah, in the gallery. And by the way, you don't have to know how to code stuff to take advantage of shortcuts. You go to the gallery. Apple's got a lot of really neat stuff for you already. And there's a item download. I think it's download MP3 or download audio in the gallery, and you install that, and it'll show up in your share sheet. So if you go to a web page, you load an MP3 in Safari, you tap the share icon, you scroll over to shortcuts, you tap that, and then you can choose the shortcut you want to run, which we download audio or whatever it's called, and it'll download. You can download it to your iCloud Drive or wherever you can find it in the Files app.
Right.
And so that's something that you can do now, thanks to shortcuts that Apple hasn't thought to properly implement yet. So it's really great for little things like that. And that's really my biggest use of it right there. Yeah. Okay. Pretty simple. But there's one I saw somebody came up with where you activate it, and it's like basically if you're getting pulled over by the police, you activate the shortcut and it starts recording, and it does and it turns your music off and all this other stuff. I'm not sure how actually useful that is in real life, but it's a neat idea. And that's the thing with a lot of automation stuff, and also did a home automation book, and I found a lot of people do the same thing with home automation. There's a lot of things that sounds like a really cool idea, and they code it up, and then you never actually use it. Or if you use it, you find out, oh, wait, this is way more than I actually need in this situation. And so I try to be, with any kind of automation, whether it's just automation on my iOS device or automation in my home, I try to be kind of basic with it and like, okay, what do I actually need? Instead of trying to be, it's like the Jeff Goldblum quote from Jurassic Park. You spend so much time thinking about whether you could, you didn't think about whether you should. I try to take that approach with any kind of automation.
Okay. So it doesn't sound like you get too elaborate, because, like I said, there's plenty of other podcasts out there that get into really deep into going into some major coding of different things in automation, if you want interest in that. But that was just a great review in a nutshell what shortcuts can do. Now, people get confused with shortcuts and Siri shortcuts. With Siri shortcuts, do you find any useful things with using setting up Siri shortcuts?
No, I'll be honest, I haven't found it super useful, but just to explain the difference, and Apple made this really confusing. And Apple tends to do this thing, they use what I call umbrella terms. Like a really good example would be continuity, which I think they introduced in iOS 8, which is one of my bugaboos that particular summer. But Apple introduced something, they'll call it one thing, and you look in, iCloud's another good one, because iCloud is like 10 different services, but it's all just branded as iCloud. And so they tend to do things like this. So you have Shortcuts, the app, which you download from the App Store. It's separate from a built-in feature called Siri Shortcuts. Siri Shortcuts, in plain English, is, for a long time, people wanted to be able to make their own Siri commands, and that's what Siri Shortcuts does. It's built into the OS. It's in Settings, Siri, and Search. You go in there. There's a item called Siri Shortcuts, and you can. And by default, it only suggests just a few certain things. And so it could be a little tricky to work with. But long story short, and I also have a video on this too. If you search for my name on YouTube, Josh Centers, I have a video on it. It's also on the TidBITS channel too. So if you look up TidBITS on YouTube, there's a video that shows you how to use this feature. But long story short, you can create your own custom Siri commands, and it also integrates with third-party apps. Now, I found it useful for some things. Like, for instance, a friend of mine does a show called another podcast called The Menu Bar, and I use Marco Arment's Overcast podcast player typically when I listen to such things. And so I have a Siri shortcut that I can tell Siri to play the latest episode of The Menu Bar. I have another Siri shortcut where I use Carrot Weather. Mm-hmm.
I do that too. Great app.
Yeah, by far the best weather app for iOS right now. And I can pull that up with a Siri shortcut. I forgot which one it is, but off the top of my head, I
there's
do it
so
right
many.
Here. Yeah, I got too many. But anyway, I can ask Siri for the weather, and it will pull it up as Carrot Weather instead of the built-in weather app. So those are actually pretty useful. I don't use it just a ton, but again, it's one of those things where you can kind of sand down those rough edges of iOS.
Okay, great, and I think that really gives us a good view of what shortcuts can really do. But read the book. I mean, you're going to definitely see a lot of more things you'll see in there. One of your sections that really caught my eye was hone the home screen. I like that. And there was a lot of cool things that there is available on the home screen people don't really have a good idea of, and I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about that. You did a great review of learning home screen basics and understanding the basics and moving apps and deleting apps and just all kinds of other ways of keeping things managed, and that's always where it's always just difficult. What kind of stood out as far as, I know it's probably a wider question, but what really stands out to you as far as some of the most valuable things that you can do on the home screen?
One thing people should probably know about, and this came about I think in iOS 11. For a long time you could only move one app at a time. So if you want to populate a folder, you had to drag an app, move it over, drag an app, move it over. Something to know. If you missed this is why you need my book. You can actually move multiple apps into a folder at once. And what you do is you tap and hold to drag it just like normal. And then as you're going along, if you tap other app icons, it will get added to the stack under your finger. And there will be a little bubble that'll pop up with a number, and it'll tell you how many you have in it. And then you can drop that entire stack of apps into a folder and create that, populate that folder all at once. So that's a really good thing to know about if you don't already. Another thing that stands out to me about this chapter is the notifications. We haven't quite got to that yet. But one of the things a lot of people get confused, because I do talk about notifications in this chapter. It just doesn't really fit anywhere else. I talk about, so you have the badges, those annoying little red things. First of all, I tell people, look, disable those for every app unless they absolutely need them, like VIPs in mail or messages, things like that. Things where if you see one, you tap on it, because otherwise you're just going to ignore them. That, at least in my experience. Another thing I really like being able to explain to people is the difference between temporary banners and persistent banners, or what Apple, I think they call them alerts. Apple keeps changing the names for these things, so I just say it's a temporary banner or persistent banner. And this isn't as bad as it used to be, but it used to be, especially when Apple first started doing the drop-down notifications, however many versions ago that was, you get a lot of these alert banners that would just pop down and just stay there, and people are like, what is this? And they have to swipe them away. And so you can adjust that, and there is a name for it, and there's a setting for it, and you can make temporary ones persistent. You can make the persistent ones temporary. So a good thing to know if you feel like you're not really in control of your notifications. And this is something I advise every iOS user: do not be afraid to turn off notifications for an app. No. I tell you, I do that in the book, but you get way too many of the dang things.
Drives you crazy.
Yeah, and so don't be afraid. Just turn them all off and just turn on the ones you need. Messages you probably need, phone you probably need. Maybe I almost said Twitter, but not really. I turn the ones for Twitter off, except for DMs. If someone DMs me, I get it. Like, you contacted me through DM, so I saw that notification. Like Messenger apps, typically I'll say, turn those notifications on, turn the rest of them off. Now of course, like we mentioned, Carrot Weather. One of the things all about Carrot Weather is it'll actually warn you about bad weather, which in Chicago, I guess it's mostly snowstorms you got there. Down here, we have tornadoes. Those things will straight
a lot
up
of
kill
snow
you.
here. Come on. In fact, it's going to be 50 degrees to get today.
Really?
For
Oh man,
January. Yeah. So
man,
that's
that's
unusual.
crazy. Yeah, that ain't right. So yeah, but yeah, I just give that sort of advice. Like, yeah, turn off those annoying notifications because you'll get overloaded. If you have a bunch of them you don't need or want, you're going to get overloaded with them, and then you're going to end up ignoring the ones you actually need to see. So,
yeah, no, and that chapter alone, it should be one of the more focused chapters, just to be comfortable with the home screen. 3D Touch, you had some tricks in there for 3D Touch. You like 3D Touch? I'm not. I mean, I use it somewhat, not much. What do you think?
I think it's largely useless. What
That's what I thought.
what I do like, and it seems like Apple tends to agree with me. I do like the taptic feedback.
Oh, for sure.
And so, the iPhone 10R, XR, or however you want to say it, it skips the 3D touch and just offers the haptic or taptic, whatever. It offers that feedback. Right. So I think that's the way things are going to go. I think 3D touch is probably going to slowly be phased out for various reasons. But I do have some tips. If you do like the 3D touch, hey, if you have a phone, if you paid the money for a phone that supports it, you should get the most of it. For instance, you can 3D press 3D touch a folder and it'll pop out apps from it. Just try on different things is what I'll suggest. Try it on different apps. There's lots of little shortcuts. It's sort of like a right click or a control click on the Mac. So it's one of those things. It's fun to experiment and see what you can find there.
Yeah. So that's definitely some good tips on that, and working on the home screen. Another topic, and I've done a presentation on this before, and is on the use of share sheets. Shared Sheets has a lot of powerful features that people don't even realize, and you have some tricks in there. Maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the tricks that you had related to the Share Sheets.
Oh yeah, I mean, wow, Share Sheets, it's kind of a misnomer. I wish Apple would redesign this particular interface because there's so much more than just sharing the stuff. There's all sorts of actions you can pull up. Like for instance, if you use 1Password. If you need to summon 1Password, that's where it lives. In Safari, you can do things like you can pull up a share sheet, you can search in a page, you can request a desktop site, all sorts of little things like that. And I suggest some of these in the book. And it's one of those things. Let's see. There's a feature in a lot of apps where you can, like for instance, in Safari, you can save a web page as a PDF. And that's a share. I guess that makes some sense because you can share it with the Apple Books. But there's lots of stuff like that. So one of those things, different apps play with it. Tap that little arrow and see what you get in that share sheet because there's all kinds of crazy stuff you can find in there.
Oh yeah, for sure. And it really, a lot of people don't realize the different areas where you can go in the share sheet and being able to actually edit it. I mean, editing is the other challenge too. Just going in and turning on the activities that you want in each row, and just going in there and working with that stuff. So
that could be tricky too because a lot of apps you have to turn those features on before you can see them in the share sheet. So I'm really hoping on my wish list for iOS 13. Is it really gonna be iOS 13? One of my things on my wish list, is that they redesign that somehow. Like, another one, if you want to mark up a web page or mark something up, that's in the share sheet. It's not really a share thing, but it's just here's where all the miscellaneous actions go.
Yeah. So that definitely has some good information in there. Other topic I wanted to bring up too is iPad has some special features in it, and we talked about it earlier with Notes, you being able to work with Instant Notes, and you explained that in the Control Center. Can you kind of elaborate a little bit on that, on the Instant Note and in the iPad and what it can do?
Right. So on the iPad, as I mentioned before, if you have an Apple Pencil and of course a compatible iPad, yeah, that's very important. You can tap on the screen. You have to wake the iPad up first. That's the trick to it. But then once the
Yeah.
iPad's awake, even if it's locked, you tap the pencil to it, and it will open up a I think by default it's a new note, and then you can just draw on the screen there. And then if you don't have an Apple Pencil, or you have a device, or you have an iPhone, whatever, you can, as I said, you can do that from Control Center too. It's the exact same thing if you press that button from Control Center. Something Apple didn't really explain very well when they introduced this feature, probably because they wanted to sell Apple Pencils. And I can't say as I blame them, but that is something you don't have to have an Apple Pencil to use. And this is something. This chapter actually evolved out of iOS 11 because Apple added so much new stuff for the iPad in iOS 11. I just looked at everything, and before we had we had a chapter on multitasking, and we added some of the special iPad features, and I had like various special I had to do special little subsections throughout the whole book and say, okay, well, this is an iPad, this is for the iPad. And finally got to the point, Apple added so much stuff for the iPad that I'm like, okay, the iPad has to have its own chapter. That's all. Otherwise, this thing's going to be unreadable otherwise. And so, and hopefully that makes things a lot more convenient for readers. And so all your special iPad stuff, bam, it's all in one place.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about some of the other features, especially the dock. I mean, how do you find managing the dock? Because I actually like it.
Yeah,
as far as moving things around.
Yeah, so they came out with that new dock in iOS 11. The I call it the Mac-like dock. I like it a lot, and I really like the suggested apps thing they have on the right side there, where it's like frequently used apps, or apps they think you're about to use, or apps you've used recently. I found that's actually really handy.
It is.
A lot of times those automatic suggestion things are just annoying. Like some of the ones they add in iOS 12, like for instance, every time I pull down the search, I pull down Spotlight search now, it tries to get me to send a message to my mother, which is kind of funny. Hey, call your mama. So those are actually pretty useful. So I do like that dock. I do like it. It is definitely a move forward.
And then multitasking gestures and using two apps at once. Those are always been some tricky features I've used. How do you find as far as multitasking and switching on the iPad?
I'll be honest. I don't use the split screen stuff very much. I don't. I know how to use them. I tell you how to use them in the book. I personally, though, I don't know. Maybe you have to have a big iPad to really take advantage of it. And what I found too about just normal people who use iPads. Like my mom has one, my mother-in-law has one, my wife had. Well, sure. She technically has one. My kid always steals it. Most normal people do not use these. In fact, a lot of normal people don't even know these things exist until they accidentally invoke them. So it's something I think Apple could do a much better job of all around. It also, as more of a power user. And I found other guys like us, get frustrated by it too, because it's kind of limited. So on one hand, it's very easy to stumble into and feel like you've broken your iPad if you're just an everyday user who doesn't read into this stuff. Mm-hmm. And if you're a more advanced user, you find it very limiting and restrictive. So I think there could be a lot of work done there. I mean, Apple's made a lot of improvement. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot more work that can be done. But the good thing for me is, as a guy who's selling books, yes, this feature is kind of broken and confusing. So you need the book to understand how to use it.
You're funny. So and then lastly, I wanted to touch a little bit on Spotlight search. I find that Apple, I don't mind that you have to just scroll down and be able to search for things very simply and easily as far as accessing it goes. And then the features. I mean, do you like a lot of these features? I mean, some of these things I like to turn off. I mean, Siri suggestions is another one that kind of drives me crazy. I don't know what your thoughts on that is.
Yeah, I'll be honest. It's kind of, the Siri suggestions have been kind of annoying. At first, I was like, first of all, I'm just like waiting for these things to pop up so I can say, oh yeah, here's a screenshot of it. Oh yeah, there it is. I can tell you how it works. Because and even to this day, there are some features that do not emerge in the betas for whatever reason. Maybe it needs more developer support, or Apple has to flip a switch on the server end, or not as bad as it used to be. Not as bad as iOS 8. But so at first it's like, oh, hey, finally I see this thing. And now, like, every time I see it, I'm like, oh boy, that's really annoying. And really, if I have a general annoyance with iOS these days, it's that a lot of times it feels like it's my mother, because it'd be like, well, don't play with the phone while you're driving. It's time to go to bed. Your bedtime timer's going off. Call your mama. Call your mother. It's like, okay, all right, like I'm paying like $70 a month for this thing. Okay, like I'm the boss here. The shortcuts, those suggestions, I don't find them terribly useful. Now, what I typically will use Spotlight for is for app launching, because I have way too many apps. It's funny, like, I've given mug presentations where people like boo me or get mad at me for all the apps I have on my phone, because I will download literally just anything, like, and so people will make judgment. Oh, you use that app? Like, no, I heard about it, I download it. That's just the way I am, because I'm constantly looking for something to write about or make a video about or just whatever. So I have probably 10,000 apps on my phone. It's a sickness. It's terrible. And see, and every few years I have to declare bankruptcy and just wipe the phone and just start fresh. So there's probably maybe 4 apps I actually use ever. I'm pretty basic when it comes down to it. But yeah, when I do need I do need one of those obscure apps that isn't on my first home screen, I have to go searching for it.
Yeah. So, no, it's Spotlight it is very powerful, and it is helpful. One other thing I want to talk about was switching apps. There was always that myth of either switching apps or closing apps. They've made it a lot easier, especially with the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 10s, and where before in iOS 11 you swiped it up, you had to hold it down to shut it down. But now you can just swipe it up, and then you can get and close each one of them. But there's always been a myth that you had to close your apps out. Apple always says you don't need to close them. I mean, do you agree with that?
Yeah, generally. I have friends who I cannot convince them otherwise. They will close. I mean, every time I look over, like, they're closing every single app just as soon as they open it. And maybe it's like a compulsive thing. I don't know. I'm not here to judge, but I will say,
me either.
Generally, just leave your apps open unless you have a problem. Now, some apps you're going to have a problem, and some apps habitually have problems. Like, I'll tell you an app to keep closed is Facebook, because Facebook. Yes. I'm convinced that Facebook does a lot of ugly things that I'm not even sure Apple knows about. I do not trust Facebook in the least, but barring not having it installed, but see, they kind of force your hand on it. Facebook makes use of Facebook. Yeah, they make it very hard to not use the app. They'll just rip features out of the web browser if they have to. They want you to use that app because they're listening to everything you say. Anyway, that's one I would close pretty consistently. I'll tell you a trick to this. I'll tell you a trick for this. And I mentioned this in the book. If you go to settings, go to battery. And then it takes forever for the thing to load. But it'll tell you, it has all these fancy graphs and stuff. But if you look down and you look at battery usage by app, and so what it's telling me here, see, what you're looking for, there's a little word they'll put under the app. They'll say background activity. So Twitter has used 34% of my battery life today, which says a lot about me. And then
you love Twitter, I know that.
Yeah, I'm terrible at Twitter. Facebook has used a quarter of my battery life, but now it says background activity there because they're recording everything you do. So that's an app that you should probably consider closing or never installing in the first place. And this is a little worrisome. My Bible app has used 6% of my battery with background activity. So I'm wondering what the heck the background activity is in the Word of the Lord. Now, Photos has used 4%, and it says background activity. But see, I expect that because I want Photos to be uploading my photos, right? Gmail, 3% background activity. But again, I want Gmail to be syncing my mail when I don't have it open. So I don't mind that at all. So that's just something to keep an eye for. But see, that's a little worrisome if Facebook is taking up so much battery in the background. And Scotty Loveless, who's a former Apple genius, he wrote a great blog post a few years ago. As far as I know, it's still current, and he talks about this specific issue about closing the apps, all that. And one of the things he recommends he recommended in that post to maximize your battery life is do not install Facebook because it does a bunch of weird stuff in the background that nobody knows what it's doing. And so that's a battery tip for you. So yeah, maybe yeah.
No, that was great. We appreciate that. One more thing I wanted to touch upon a little bit is you talked about handoff. And have you had any good experiences with handoff? Because sometimes it doesn't work real well.
Mm-hmm. Handoff is one of those features. Frankly, I think it's kind of ill-advised. Mm-hmm. It's one of those things where they're throwing the wrong solution. Apple used the wrong solution for the right problem. The problem is you need to be able to sync things between your phone and your computer. And the solution for that is the cloud. Apple's solution for that is a weird mix of at the time was high-end hardware to try to push people to buy newer hardware. I mean, this is just the way Apple thinks about everything. Now, one of those features, I don't think this is technically considered handoff, but it's under that continuity umbrella we mentioned earlier. One feature I use all the time is AirDrop. And because sync, like I take tons of screenshots. I need them on my desktop right away. iCloud Sync sometimes is instant, sometimes it takes forever. And so I just AirDrop, and it's the easiest way to do it. I don't have to connect a cable or anything like that. Android probably has a better way of doing it. I could probably just run an FTP server on an Android phone, and people do that. People do that. They run the servers and stuff. It's crazy. More power to them. But if you're in the iOS world like we are, AirDrop's great for that.
Yeah. So. Wow, we talked about a lot of stuff, didn't we? And I covered both your books, too, in a very short period of time here. So make sure you go out and go to takecontrolbooks.com. I'll have links in the show notes, and you take a look and buy that. It's a great book, believe me. And it's $14.99. Did I get that price right? For the iOS 12 book that's out there. If you go to takecontrolbooks, like I said, .com, there's all kinds of other great titles out there, too. Just buy the book. I mean, but I wanted to get Josh on today and talk a little bit about a lot of this stuff. I mean, he's also done a book on Apple TV. You did a great book on home automation, and as well as you did a book on Preview, which was great.
Did that with Adam Inks.
Yeah, so
I'll tell you what, the Preview book was really what the notes book.
Yeah, it kind of go hand in hand between the two. So, but yeah, definitely go out there and check out that website and tell everybody how people can get a hold of you and how they can reach you.
You can see most of my professional work on at tidbits.com, where I write and edit articles. Take Control Books, you've already mentioned. If you look me up on YouTube, just search for Josh Centers on YouTube. I try to make at least one video a week with usually focused on Apple stuff. And again, if you're brave and you don't mind terribleness, you can follow me on Twitter at jcenters. Election season's coming up, so that should be fun. I'm going to try to dial all that back. I'm trying to dial my Twitter way back. It's too much. Yeah, I tend to have opinions that make everyone angry, so I should probably just keep them to myself.
No, I'm absolutely thrilled you came on today, and appreciate you being here. So
thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's do this. It's a wrap. Let's wrap it up for this week. Please send your comments, questions, and suggestions to our email address at feedback@intouchwithios.com. You can follow us on Twitter at InTouchWithIOS. You can also subscribe in your favorite podcatcher, including Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, and even TuneIn Radio. Or better yet, go to our website at InTouchWithIOS.com, where all the links to listen are on that page. I am Dave Ginsburg, and you can find me on Twitter at DaveG65. Again, thanks to my guest, Josh Centers. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.